the Honorable Prime Minister, members of the media, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, Telems, Tel TV Plus, Channel 15, respective radio stations island-wide, and online viewers. I'm Rolika Roach, and welcome to the live Council Ministers Press Briefing for today, Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. At this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, Savura Jacobs, to address you. Prime Minister Jacobs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rolika. Good morning and welcome to all tuned in this morning, and good morning to you as well. Good morning to the media. Good morning to our visiting BOP students who have also taken up part of the service and will be learning during this month as part of our program to give opportunities to our youth. There are two working at DCOM. Welcome to you. And hopefully this will be a good experience for you as well as all of our students working throughout government organizations since Monday. It is today the first day that I am speaking to you post our Emancipation Day celebrations, and I would like to commend the Culture Department for yet another wonderful commemoration of our Emancipation Day on Saturday, July 1st. We saw, of course, the usual gamut of speeches where you could hear the sentiments from whether it's Parliament, His Excellency the Governor, and myself, but also the wonderful cultural performances which form part and parcel of our promotion of our orange economy. As you may know, the Governor held his symposium on that, and it means basically capitalizing on the creatives within our community, ensuring that they have opportunities to share their talents, to share their gifts. And we saw dance, poetry, songs, as well as the Art Saves Lives under Miss Nicole DeWeaver and her organization, that those students put on quite a performance as well. So we see that our creativity continues to know no bounds. There was a great, let's say, very poignant opening to the cultural manifestation with the words of Lisandro Suriel, and the homage he paid to our ancestors, not just our African ancestors, but also the indigenous people of St. Martin. Really words to think about and words with which our AXAR committee as well as government must now pick up the mantle to ensure that history is properly recorded and due respect and honor is given to all our ancestors who have gone before. Of course, we also had the State Secretary who visited St. Martin as well as the other Dutch Caribbean islands during this period of time, as well as the expressions of His Majesty the King on the apology that he made for slavery past. I must say the State Secretary was moved by the experience that she had here in St. Martin. Initially, she was invited thinking we would have the Run for Freedom last year when they were here on September 5th and 6th. However, we did not have that as part of the program this year, but she still opted to come with her delegation and go to the other islands as well on that day to experience Emancipation Day as we celebrate and commemorate the hard work, the toil of our ancestors. Also taking into account that this year we talk about being born free, so not focusing on the enslavement period, but on who we were also before that enslavement period. And of course, out of this awareness year for 2023 and beyond, we hope to be able to, as Government St. Martin, once we've received the advice of the AXAR committee, be able to put forth our plan of action in terms of how we expect to be dealt with after the comma, so to speak. The State Secretary's visit also had its the usual discussions on topics, ongoing topics of concern, being the refinancing, being the possible projects that can come out now that funding is available, as I've mentioned in previous press briefings, as well as being here for the opening of the World Bank office. As we all know, the World Bank office is possible due to the trust fund projects. They are the ones that are the execution of the funds or the dissemination of the funds. And so in our tripartite of Dutch government, St. Martin, and the World Bank, our steering committee takes the decisions and has taken a decision for the dissemination of the funds. Having the office here in St. Martin will now allow for even closer collaboration and as well as in other ways in which they can assist us with projects. So we're happy to welcome them, and congratulations to them, as well as the Central Bank for making the space available. I'd like to go over now to something that is less news, but more of the condolences that St. Martin are dealing with at this moment. Today, we lay as Government of St. Martin, together with the loved ones, colleagues, and family, to rest Miss Kalila Blyden, nurse, who passed away last week. We did have a book signing where the family was invited last week, etc., and it is open at Government Building, but she will be laid to rest today. And I would just like to once more add my condolences to that of Government of St. Martin, to the family, friends, loved ones who are left to mourn. May we all shine as brightly as she did and make the impact that she made in her work and in her life. For sure, her spirit lives on. We also lost a teacher, Miss Corinne Isaac, earlier this week. This one was also a hard blow. Two young women taken, for our part, too early in their careers, too early in their lives, but we give God thanks for what they have been able to achieve. No one knows when their time will come, and so we wish the family, friends, and colleagues of Corinne Isaac, teacher Corinne Isaac, much strength as well as we face this loss. Last but certainly not least, the entire St. Martin is mourning the loss of former Mayor Albert Fleming. For me, it is bittersweet that, you know, in an official capacity, you have to make statements, but also for me, it is a personal acquaintance, a personal friend based on connections from way back when. So for me, he's Pops. And so to the family, friends, the people of St. Martin, who will now have to, you know, face up to the fact that we have lost a legend. He was a living legend for a long time, offering mentoring and advice to most persons who would be willing to listen, regardless of political affiliation. A shining light, a steadfast, humble human being who showed that the position never went to his head for sure, and a leader of which we can all emulate. Former Mayor Albert Fleming, he has made a great impact on our community, especially, of course, to his constituents whom he served for several years. And I trust and hope that the minister, my deputy, will be offering the words of condolences on my behalf as I'll be off island. But at this moment, I do convey my deepest sympathies, personal as well as professionally, on behalf of the government of St. Martin, to the family, friends, loved ones, and the people of St. Martin on the passing of former Mayor Albert Fleming, a true statesman. Thank you, Relaika. That will be all for now.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, for your opening remarks. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. Thank you so much for joining us. We now move on to the question and answer session, and Bibi Haj Shah of SMN News, you have the floor.
Good morning, Relaika. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, today it's you alone, so we're kind of scratching our heads for all the questions that we can find that relates to your ministry. However, can you give me an update on the cleanup of the civil registry? What is the actual amount of registered voters on the island? And yes, give me a little bit of details on that. How much was there the last time, registered voters, and how much is there today?
I don't have any update from the last time. I think I noted that there were about 58,000 persons registered in our civil registry, 58,477 to be exact. I did have meetings with the civil registry recently, as well as with other stakeholders in terms of where we're going and how we're going to, like, looking at the numbers, etc. And I think in my last, I would have to go back and look, but in my last response to you, I said that early August I'd be able to give a better impression of where we're going in terms of the date for election, etc. The number of seats would have to remain at 15 if the numbers stay where they are. It's only if our registry goes above 61,000 is when the number goes to 17. So that's all the information I have regarding that at this time.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs. Thank you, Bibi. Stephen Cerulean of PJD2 Radio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. Good morning to you, Prime Minister. You said that you met with the State Secretary apart from the Emancipation Day activities, discussions we had. Can you give us an idea as to whether or not the loan payment was discussed and if the Dutch government has decided to at least delay the payment of the loan? We heard the president of the central bank basically saying that this is very essential for St. Martin to be able to have a delay in payment.
Well, in our discussions, thank you for that question, Stephen. With the State Secretary, of course, as I mentioned before, we have a work group working on St. Martin's proposal. We got the, let's say, the cadres, what you call cadres in English, the framework within which the Dutch government is willing to work. We are preparing our response. We have another week or two before we must be able to submit that. The State Secretary did, we all agree that the loans cannot be due come October 10-10-10. So in the least, if we don't have an agreement as to how exactly it will be refinanced, it will be pushed off. But we want to be able to have an agreement before that. So the goal is to ensure that we have one before the deadline, because it is important for their budget handling by the middle of by time they have their recess at the middle of the year, middle of July, sorry. So we have just a little more time to be able to, let's say, bring our proposal, tighten our proposal to ensure that we can cover as many bases as possible, taking into consideration all the risks. But of course, as St. Martin, we would like to see, as MP George constantly refrains, that there is some level of kwijtschelding, some level of cancellation of the debt, especially seeing that on the second floor, on the second chamber floor in Parliament in the Netherlands, that the former State Secretary mentioned that this was a possibility once we were living up to our obligations as it relates to the country package. And St. Martin's review up until now has been very, very positive. In fact, doing much better in terms of keeping up than the other countries. So we're still hoping, and that will form part of our proposal still, that is taken into consideration, but we will put forth multiple options and have those negotiations within the next coming weeks. So once those are finalized, I will be able to update, but know that the Dutch government is open to not making it directly payable and pushing it off if we don't have an agreement by then. Well, before then. We need to know before then. Yeah?
Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you, Stephen. We now move on to the second round. Bibi, you have the floor.
I'd like to ask a clarification, then I'll go to my second question. Prime Minister, the last time you did say 58,477 persons. Does this include children, residents, people with even a permanent residency? And then you said the amount has to be over 61,000 before we move to 17 seats. Is it 61,000 persons or 61,000 registered voters? I'd like to have the clarity as to whether it is 61,000 persons, or which include children, foreign residents, etc., or is it just voters? My second question, Prime Minister, you mentioned the World Bank being on having now an office on St. Martin, which I expect that the process for projects and the release of funds will be much faster. After all, we are 6 years after Irma, and there are lots of pending projects. What I'd like to know, Prime Minister, does the new Parliament building fit in as a project under the World Bank, or are we going to have, is there a specific budget for the new Parliament building? And mostly what I'd like to know, would this be another fiasco like the new General Hospital? I'm sorry, it is a fiasco, and I can only call it the way it is.
Let me first deal with your clarification. The 58,000+ is of all registered persons, so including children non-national. So that is the number they look at in determining how many seats, not by the amount of voters. To go to, does that answer the question? Yes. Great. To go to your other question, you know how I feel about those inflammatory statements, so I won't address that. I did not state that with the bank having offices here, World Bank, that funds would flow faster. I said that it would be able to facilitate the processes. So there's a lot of flying back and forth that takes place with the bank management or the program management. Now the program manager will be here on the island with a small staff so that things can be dealt with and expedited. It doesn't necessarily mean funding. The funding goes through a process. Once the projects are approved and all of the checks and balances have been met, it goes automatically and seamlessly. So that's never an issue. It's a matter of ensuring that there's agreement on all of the safeguards, the safety and environmental safeguards that need to be met, ensuring that, you know, the procurement took place. And any technical assistance that they can render, they now can render it faster. So that's all I meant, that's all I said. The new Parliament building is not part of the trust fund. The extension of the trust fund was to ensure that, for instance, things like sports facilities that hadn't been touched before, school gyms could be done, and some other key projects that we felt needed to be done, which we got agreement for, and it was extended. So we're very happy with that. The new government building is to be done in terms of the manner in which this government building was done, in a kind of a build-to-lease situation. So we're busy with the terms of reference. We also have to deal with parking and some other things that are planned at that end, but as soon as those plans are further along, and I believe that the Parliament building has put together a committee to kind of push to ensure that that gets priority as well. So once we have that information, that will be shared. But it is not to be, you know, delayed for any reason, because we do budget, and the idea is to have it budget neutral, that what we're paying in rent would then turn over to what would be the lease agreement. But at the end of the day, we're moving forward. We're seeing that the demolition is taking place, and hopefully the terms of reference for the actual design, et cetera, will be out soon.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Stephen, you have the floor.
Thanks. Prime Minister, we've heard the apology coming from the King on the role of the Dutch government on the slave trade. Can we get your initial reaction based on his apology? And are you able to provide an update as it pertains to the Advisory Committee on Slavery?
Yes, this is interesting. I've been getting calls since the day it was made from Curaçao journalists. This is the first journalist on St. Martin that has asked. And it's very interesting. They ask, how does the St. Martin people feel about the apology? And I can honestly say, I do not know how the St. Martin people feel about the apology. How do I feel about the apology? I can say. How does government feel about it? I also cannot say. As you know, after the apology of Mr. Rutte, we were asked to give our response. I gave my response. My response still stands. For me, for many people, it was important that the King apologized as well. And there was a lot of cheering that took place when that happened in the Netherlands. We did not broadcast it live, so we cannot see collectively how people may have reacted. We were at the time having our local emancipation celebration. I think for the persons who are interested, who demanded that the King also apologize, they got their apology. What for me was still missing was the discussion on reparations. What was interesting to me is the focus on how many, and in fact, highlighting the fact that many Dutch citizens are not aware of the true history of how they achieved the golden era that they were taught in school. And so I believe that there is at least a commitment in the government, including the King, to ensure that the Dutch people in the Netherlands and wherever they may be would understand, the indigenous European Dutch would understand the true history as well, which for me, would build true empathy to the plight of the descendants of the enslaved, which we are, whether we are in the Netherlands or whether we are here. For me, it is important what comes after the commas to ensure that in all our actions, so including our regular meetings, that the Dutch government keeps in mind the things that they have apologized for. And that we are treated with equality, and that the vestiges of colonialism that are still present are erased one by one. That when we, and I encourage my colleagues to highlight when you are in discussions with persons who do not realize that their approach or their or the words that they use or the manner in which that they deal with the Dutch Caribbean countries is sometimes still condescending and sometimes still reminds us of our place, that how they saw us, basically, and they do not see it, that it was discriminatory. So what was reassuring is that even though some persons in the Netherlands didn't see the necessity for an apology, they believe in equality, they believe in equal human rights, and that we are all human, just as was intended by the Creator. And so hopefully in all future deliberations, in all future negotiations, that will be at the forefront, and the manner in which we're dealt with will be with respect and equitable, in a manner of equitable treatment.
If I may, Ms. Roach, on the issue of the Atonement Reparations Committee, can you provide an update for us?
Yes, I think I mentioned last time that I would give them until July, so once the break is over in August, I will be meeting with them to get the updated, once I've received the report, to meet with them and get their plan of action. So we're expecting that by the end of the month, but hopefully in early August, we will meet to discuss this, so that thereafter I'll be able to give their recommendations.
Thank you,
But
Prime.
they have been, let's say, they are, what's that word? They can access, they can put forward to receive assistance to be able to carry out the necessary research. They're connected also with the University of St. Martin. So I expect that we'll be able to have more tangible actions visible within short. They must also put together an association that is separate, completely separate from government, establish an association, a foundation themselves as that, so that moving forward, they have that level of autonomy.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs. Bibi, we are now move on to the third round, and you have the floor.
As a follow-up to my colleague's question, have you, Prime Minister, dispatched any response to the King and even addressed the situation of reparations? Because I myself, too, were looking forward to hear something about reparations in that apology, and I didn't hear it. And as for my third question, or probably final question, if it's so, just last week, I believe, Winair announced, and there were photos sent to the media with the new ATR that they acquired. What I'd like to know is if the new CEO would consider the local pilots for the captaining of this aircraft, or are they going to recruit foreign pilots, as I'm told?
First of all, I think congratulations are in order for Winair, because as we know, airlift within the Dutch Caribbean has been, or within the Caribbean has been limited. So this increases opportunities for us to be able to travel to areas that would take sometimes overnighting in different countries, such as Aruba and so on. So we're very happy that the ATRs are finally here. Government supports the purchase of them. There has been training ongoing for local stewardesses, et cetera. And as long as our local pilots are qualified, right now we have Twin Otter, mainly Twin Otters that have been flying. I do not know off the top of my head how many of our pilots have trained to fly the ATR, but of course it is the goal for us to ensure that locals can hold all functions within our government-owned companies. So that would be the goal. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, it was in a government event, but I highlighted the achievements of a young St. Martin who's working at KLM as a mechanical engineer. So we sometimes limit ourselves to what we can do and if we have pilots already out there in the diaspora, I encourage you, apply to be a pilot by Winair. We can't force people to apply, but I will find out from the management of Winair who are the first sets of pilots, but they did assure me in our last meeting that we held that all of the pilots are continuously trained and upgraded, and they have a great track record, and they will continue to ensure that our pilots are the first to be hired. They also offer training to persons and are in direct contact with persons who are studying pilots to ensure that when they come back, they can hire them. So that is, I think, good news for the people of St. Martin to hear. And we do 100% support our locals, and I encourage you all to continue to upgrade yourselves. Education is a lifelong journey. It's not an end destination. Things constantly change in the world, and if you want to progress, you have to ensure to upgrade yourselves. And all government-owned companies received in writing that they must put policies in place to ensure growth of our local workforce to achieve the highest possible levels within the companies.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacob. Stephen, you have the final question.
Sorry, and I did not respond to whether I responded to the King. No, I did not send a response to the King. That was also not required. Remember, even with our professional from the Reparations Committee of CARICOM mentioned that the highest member of state, the representative of the state, which was the Prime Minister's apology, was deemed sufficient. Others demanded, and the King himself felt the need to add his apology to it. He said it touched his heart. He understands that his family has benefited, and he will continue to do the research as to how much, insofar, etc. And we look forward to hearing what the reparations will be. That is still the stance of St. Martin for sure, regardless of not having a final decision or recommendation from the AXAR committee. We 100% believe that reparations must be paid, and though we acknowledge that now we have more access to funding via the Dutch government that wasn't there before, not even up to last year, that does not equate reparations.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. Rich. Prime Minister, I'm sure you would agree that running sewage water on the main roads and surroundings is definitely very, very disturbing. It is, in fact, very embarrassing for us as a country. We always talk about we need to keep our surroundings clean, take pride in what we do, and what have you. But this situation continues. What is government doing, Prime Minister, to address this once and for all, to at least prevent or avoid us from being embarrassed by this entire situation?
Thank you for that question. I know before we started, I said keep your questions directed to me and my portfolio, but okay. I do know a little bit about what government is doing. We do have some funding on the trust fund for wastewater. We're looking at other sources of funding because it's not enough. Expanding the capacity at the current sewage plant and getting more connections to it is also part of the plan, and we have been for several years in discussion with our French counterparts to jointly work on a sewage plant over the hill, so in the Cold Bay area. So those are the plans. We'll continue to forward those plans, and I will allow the Ministry of ROMI to further update in a subsequent broadcast when they're present.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs. Members of the media, this does bring us to the end of the question and answer session. Any further questions can be sent to Prime Minister Jacobs' cabinet in writing. Honorable Prime Minister, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. For rebroadcast, tune into St. Martin Gov Radio via Telems Tel TV Plus Channel 15, the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, YouTube channel Government of St. Martin. For video on demand, log on to the Government of St. Martin's YouTube channel. On behalf of the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I'm Rolika Roach and wishing you a pleasant day further.